Eh, Buenas tardes, teacher. Iniciamos a las 6.
Buenas tardes, ¿qué tal? Sí, está bien. Estoy un poquito más a tiempo para cualquier cosa.
Ah, ok. No sé si le doy 5 minutos extra para ver si los estudiantes se conectan o si iniciamos a las 6 o 6:05. Usted dirá.
Ok, de repente 6:05, pues, y así
Ok,
esperamos que ellos lleguen.
ok, está bien.
Dele, listo.
Ok. Buenas tardes a todos, sean bienvenidos a una sesión de interpretación simultánea 2 del profesor Jezreel Vega. Para el buen desarrollo de esta sesión les pedimos seguir las siguientes recomendaciones. Las sesiones se graban, pueden verlas nuevamente en la plataforma virtual. Les solicitamos que por favor silencien sus micrófonos y puedan activarlos cuando van a hacer consultas o aportes por el permiso del docente. Les pedimos que mantengan su cámara activa. De no poder hacerlo, enviarse expulsa por el chat de Zoom. De lo contrario, será retirado de la sesión y serán restados puntos en la valoración del docente. Mi rol como moderador es apoyar y facilitar en la parte técnica consultas por el chat personal en general. Les exhorto a tener bolígrafo y papel para hacer anotaciones y aprovechar al máximo esta sesión. Esta sesión tiene un tiempo de duración de 120 minutos.
Okay, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Vamos a comenzar la clase entonces. Okay. Okay. Okay, Magdalena. Bueno, en ese caso, tiene que enviar un correo, ¿cierto? Como estaba mencionando la moderadora, ¿verdad?
Solo queda como evidencia aquí en el chat de Zoom cuando en la transmisión de la clase, cuando la vuelvan a poner en la plataforma, quede evidenciado que ya presentó su excusa.
Ok, perfecto. Muchas gracias, pues. Listo. Okay, so welcome again. Thank you very much to the moderator. So today, as you know, it's the second week. We start with the second week. I know that um, we start like very, very heavy the last class with a lot of topics and a lot of information. But in this time, we're gonna start with a brief review about all of the information that we're talking. So just to remind you, try to have um, something just write the information that I'm going to share with you. If there is something that maybe it's not well shared or well presented, please you don't doubt and ask me, because well, remember, my job in here is just to help you and just to um well, just to make the clarifications that are required. Okay, so I'm going to present my screen right now. Just give me one sec. So in the previous class, we were reading and we were talking about the legal proceedings. How um as interpreters we need to proceed at the moment that we have to um intervene, or like what do we need to do when we have to translate. Now it's important to understand that our focus in this topic is courtrooms, trials, depositions and impositions, and immigration hearings. Okay, so this is a review, as I said. Now in this video that we were watching, we were talking about how the interpreter had to deal with all the situations that are presented in the courtrooms. It's important to understand that it doesn't matter if maybe for you, if there is something that maybe you feel like it's a little bit uncomfortable, but in these situations that they are like, they have to confront, it's important to understand that this is a job and this is not a simple job. Okay, that there are some things that you have to deal, and maybe at that point, you have to understand that it doesn't matter how hard it is, At the end, you need to help the people and understand that they are humans. Okay? So we're gonna watch this video. We're gonna watch it again. And we're gonna see a few things that maybe we didn't see in the last class. Okay?
My name is Aide Klaus, and I interpret English and Spanish.
My name is David Sweet Cordero, and I interpret English to Spanish, Spanish to English.
My name is Tin Quan. I'm a California certified court interpreter for the Vietnamese language.
Well, I was raised biculturally, binationally. My mother's Mexican, my father's American.
When I was a political refugee staying in a refugee camp in Thailand, I would be called upon to interpret.
I was born and raised in El Salvador, and I went to a bilingual school, so I was exposed to both languages. I just became fascinated with transferring things from one language to another.
The role of the court interpreter is to serve as an instrument for communication among the different players in the court, making sure that everybody, regardless of their language ability, national origin, ethnicity or culture, has access to the court system.
My name is Viola Garcia. I work for Contra Costa County Superior Court, and I'm the interpreter coordinator. Every morning I work on a daily calendar for the next day, just to make sure that all the courts are provided with the interpreters that they need daily.
First impression you have of a courthouse is you walk in there, everything is very grand, and immediately you feel intimidated by it. You have to go through security, through the metal detector, and then you have all these deputies standing in the front entrance of the courthouse.
It's hard to talk about a typical day because work is extremely varied. But generally speaking, we start at 8 or 8:30. If we need equipment, we pick up equipment. Then we go to the courtroom that we've been assigned to. We can do a hearing that can take from less than a minute. We could possibly be assigned to a trial that can last even months.
I interpret for a wide variety of cases, from a traffic infraction to a murder trial.
That's something that's just part of the interpreter culture, is that flexibility, versatility, and ability to go from one court to another, sometimes even to another venue or county.
On the other times that I am not needed at my home court, which is Santa Clara County, I would be released to serve other courts in neighboring counties.
The environment is very formal, very highly structured. Each person has a particular role. There's a lot of protocol, and it's very important to know what the protocol is in general in a courtroom, and also specifically what that bailiff likes, how the judge likes to do things. There's a great variety of assignments. Traffic court, sexual assault cases, hearings for restraining orders, family law cases where they're talking about alimony and custody, juvenile matters. The theory and practice of the job are very different. In theory, you can hear everything perfectly, and people don't mumble. And in reality, people speak extremely fast, they mumble, so things are much messier than I thought.
Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, I'm asked to do simultaneous interpreting, which means interpreting for the defendant for a court proceeding. When you interpret for a witness, consecutive mode of interpretation would be most appropriate, because everything the witness say is interpreted, and the interpretation would be taken down by the court reporter. So the interpreter needs to take careful and meticulous notes of the utterances of the witnesses. And from time to time, this is the least frequent mode of interpretation that is required of us, which is called the sight translation.
It's important to be accurate, maintain the register. We don't want to take away from the message or add anything.
I always carry in my bag notes and lists of words, and I continuously try to improve my vocabulary.
I run into many types of people who play very many different roles in the legal and courtroom environment. You have the defendant, what I call the limited English speaking person. May it be the defendant or the witness that you need to interpret for.
Do you solemnly swear that you will well and fully interpret from English to Spanish and from Spanish to English all questions, answers, testimony, and proceedings in this matter?
I do. We cannot give legal advice because we're not trained as lawyers to give legal advice. We're language people. We are trained to convey meaning to the person. So it's very important that we keep our roles limited to what we're trained to do.
We have more opportunity right now for interpreters, and it's really in high demand right now. Take classes on everything. Try and get as much knowledge under your belt. Go to the different locations, different courtrooms, and just sit in the back, see what's going on.
Every day is different, and it's a never-ending opportunity to learn something new every day.
Okay, very good. So I think that this video makes me think that at the end, this thing about interpretation, it's more than interpretation. It's about doing a bridge. As I said in the last class, I said that basically what you're doing is doing a bridge between you and the person that is speaking and the other person that is trying to understand what he's saying. So the main purpose of the interpretation is just to provide the opportunity of communication. Okay. Now, I don't know, Magdalena, if you can communicate with me right now, maybe through the chat, the chat box, and if you can answer me some questions. What do you think about the video? What did you understand about the video? If you can, maybe write what is your opinion about the video. It will be like very interesting. If you can do it, please let me know. But if you can do it, please try to send me a message. Okay, I want to take that answer. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so as I was saying that the main purpose of interpretation is just to provide the opportunity of communication. Okay, so there are so many types of interactions. If you notice, you can interpret it, or you can interpret as a person that maybe has let's say a traffic infraction to a child killer. Okay, so it's something that maybe it's not like very simple, because I was saying I know that it's not simple to maybe be in front of a person that maybe has done a lot of things that maybe are not correct. But at the end, guys, it's important to understand that this is a service that you're given. And for example, I don't know if you what do you think about this, but for example, the lawyers, when they have to represent someone that maybe has done a lot of crimes, they had to do it in a form that they are not like focusing on what he did. He's trying to just, I mean, he's just trying to help. So this is our main goal, help, and try to give the message, because at the end, we don't know if that person that maybe we're translating or interpreting, maybe he's innocent. But because of the lack of communication that he has, because he doesn't know the language, then that's why he cannot communicate. And he's been guilty because of that. Okay? So another thing that I could notice in this video is that people speak fast. They don't mumble. So you have to listen to what they're saying, and you need to pay attention to what they're saying. It's not like you have to listen. You have to listen and understand what they're saying. Because at the end, something very important is that, okay, so if the jury is talking, let's say that he's talking and he's explaining a few things, you need to do, or you need to say whatever he's saying at the same moment that he's saying it to your representative. Okay? So another thing about simultaneous interpreting is that it's most appropriate because the interpretation is accurate. Now, it's very important to understand this part. More people or more courtrooms is asking or are asking for simultaneous interpretation. And the reason is because it's more accurate. So if you try to explain yourself and you are trying to say whatever you're trying to say, and you say it in a form that maybe people don't understand, then it's difficult. Because at the end, even Americans, they have issue to understand us in Spanish. So what we need to do is just basically to listen and try to repeat what he's saying just in the language that we know. So one of the requirements is just to understand your language. I don't know if you noticed, but one of the facts that he was saying, one of the interpreters, is that she used to live in El Salvador, I think. So that's one of the requirements. You need to know the language. If you don't know the language, then you will be confused. And this is just the idea, to explain what he's saying, what the person is saying. But if you're confused, well, that's a complication. So one of the things that they were recommending is that you need to improve your language, and you need to improve how you speak, and also how you or the vocabulary that you have. Because, for example, you know that at this point we know that a lot of people is learning and using different words and different criteria just to speak. So if we don't learn the new terminologies and the new information that they are using, then we're going to be confused. So one of the things that they were recommended is that you need to improve your language and also your speaking. And the most important is your listening. Now, how can we do it? Well, if you see those are actions, because if you see it, listening, speaking, and reading, well, not reading. Let's talk just about speaking and listening. So the only way to understand or to learn or to improve those skills is speaking. You need to speak. Okay? So the only way to get the opportunity to speak in the better way is just speaking. And also another way is just listening. If you start listening and if you start listening to good conversations, that maybe you will learn, or you will receive the well, let's say new words at the end, that's good. So something that the girl that was talking, she was explaining is that you can give legal advices. So what does this mean? I explained this in the last class. If you try to convey someone or to change his mind or her mind about something, then you're not doing your role. Your role is just to communicate what the person is saying. Your role is not to convey. Okay? And the reason is because at the end, if you do that, then the person will be confused. And then you're not doing your job, which is help the person. Okay? And the video and explaining this part that there is a high demand in the industry interpretation. So this means that at this point, at this moment that we're talking, there's a lot of people that it's asking for your service. So if you notice, if you respect that maybe with this career that you're learning, you think that maybe, oh, this is not that important. Maybe this is something that it's not that required. So I don't think that it's like that's required. So I don't need it. No, believe me. She said that at that point, there's a lot of information that there is like required. So at this point, in the US and also here in Panama, we are requiring more interpreters than before. And the reason is because people speak English. And in this case, it's English. But if you know another language, you can do interpretation. But the main requirement is just to know the language and the communication, of course, but also to understand that you don't have to change what they think. So you can change their opinion about the things that they think. You just need to help. Okay? So this was the video that we were watching. So let's continue with the next parts. So we were talking also about this part, which is the courtroom trials. Okay. So as the video said, interpreters are frequently called upon in criminals, civil, and administrative courtroom proceedings. So if you start working as an interpreter, you will be called a lot because people will need your service and also your help. Okay. So this is another area that we were talking also, legal depositions. So in this part, it's like a pre-trial, which is about how you need to help the person at the moment that it's been asked for the things that were happening. So it's like they're asking or they're trying to do this trial just to discover the purpose of the things that were happening. Also the case, if they don't know what's about the case, what is the situation in the case, they need to ask. So this is not that serious. This is something very informal. It's more relaxed. Okay. So the primary role of the interpreter during a legal deposition is just to secure accurate and impartial communication between the deponent and the questioning attorney. Okay. So this is something that we were talking also. This is the role that the interpreter has. You see, there's a lot of information in here, but the main thing that you can see in here is that the interpreter needs to know how to do the consecutive interpretation. They need to know how to interpret in non-verbal communication. This communication is very important, and it's not like that easy, but if you see that the person is doing something, you need to do the same thing. So it's about doing. It's not like you're in a theater, but it's more like you have to recreate what he's doing. Also, the cultural and linguistic clarifications. So you need to provide clarification if he says something that maybe is it's about his own cultural culture. Also, you need to maintain neutrality. Okay, so it's your job to keep the neutrality when you're speaking. Okay, and also interpreting. And your interpretation needs to be responsible. So remember something, you need to avoid interruptions while you are interpreting. So immigration hearings, in this part, the process is just to, well, the responsibility of the interpreter is just to maintain um, or facilitate effective communication between the individuals involved in the proceedings, and ensure that language barriers do not hinder the fairness and accuracy of the process. Okay? So here are some key responsibilities of an interpreter in immigration hearings. Okay? So we need to stick to this informations that we have in here. And if we stick in here, we'll have success. So if we start with the language interpretation, we need to continue like having this language interpretation. Remember to maintain neutrality. Also, the cultural qualification, and so on. Here are some of the words that I said in the last class. I ask you to choose one of the terms that call your attention. I ask you to read the definition in the class, and also you need to review the glossary for this week, and we will have an activity with this. Okay. So what we have to do in here is that we have to, this is activity I was saying, and the activity is just to choose the correct concept of those terms: quorums, trials, deposition, and immigration hearings. So if maybe you are confused about this or you don't remember, don't worry, that's okay. So for example, we have transcript. We need to find which one is the one that we're talking. So we're gonna do this in this form. For example, we have gable. Gable, it's in courtroom trials. Okay, gable belongs to courtroom trials. Let's see the next one. Witness. Witness. Witness belong to courtroom trials. Okay. Another term that we were looking at was transcript. Transcript. So transcript belongs to depositions and also witness. Okay. So this was the topic that we were talking the last class. Okay. So in this class, we have to continue, and I'm going to ask you to stay connected and listen to what we have for you. Okay. Second. second, guys. Okay. So let's continue with this part. So the name of this new model, it's the same model, remember, as I said. So each model will have a duration of 2 weeks. So this is the week 2, so we have to continue with this. Remember that in this week, you have to do a test, okay? So remember to read the readings and also watch the videos, okay? So remember to pay attention, okay? So the title of this is Legal Proceedings again. And this is model number 1. And in reading 2, legal conferences and seminars, arbitration and mediation, interrogation, and police interviews, okay? So please,
these two
try to pay
diplomats
attention to this video. There's a lot of important information. And if you have a question, please don't doubt and ask.
are about to begin a negotiation. This one is from an unspecified Spanish-speaking country.
Hola.
And this one is from an unspecified English-speaking country.
Hello.
And these are real interpreters. And I'm Barry Slaughter Olson, a conference interpreter with 25 years of experience interpreting for diplomats and world leaders at places like the UN. When you think of interpreters, scenes like these are probably the first that come to mind. People in soundproof booths, interpreting in real time to government officials below. But interpreters often have to do their jobs in private, closed-door meetings. This is called bilateral interpreting. And as anyone who heard about the Trump-Putin meetings knows, it's a very real situation when certain meetings just have a limited number of people in a room. And those people are sworn to secrecy. This is a demonstration of what can typically happen in these meetings behind closed doors.
Comenzamos.
Shall we begin? Actually, things began before anyone even arrived. Most of the time, terms are agreed upon in advance of the meeting. The agendas are carefully negotiated and outlined. They can range from arms reduction to economic cooperation to water rights. All we need is a plausible topic to get started. Let's say dolphin-safe tuna fishing. To start, our interpreters position themselves. You'd think they'd be in the middle somewhere because they've got to hear well, right? Well, for meetings in front of the press, they don't want to be the center of attention or appear in press photos. See how they're on the sidelines here? That's so they can easily be cropped out of the pictures to be published later, which doesn't always work out. So, before this meeting begins, there are things that need to be decided. Will recordings be permitted? Is a record being kept? Who's going to attend? But this is a closed-door bilateral meeting, so it'll just be these four. Now, there are two styles of interpretation, simultaneous and consecutive. Consecutive is the most common style of interpreting in diplomatic situations. Here's an example.
It's been a while since I've been here. I'm so excited to be back. Thank you for having me.
And then,
Desde hace bastante tiempo que no venía, así que muchísimas gracias por recibirme nuevamente.
the interpreter waits until the speaker pauses,
Estamos muy agradecidos de poder colaborar nuevamente con el gobierno de su país.
and then interprets.
We're very happy to be able to collaborate again with the government of your country.
Simple, right? But what happens if the speaker goes on and on without pausing?
Estamos muy agradecidos de poder volver a colaborar con ustedes.
Interpreters rarely translate word for word. Instead, we remember specific ideas and translate those ideas accordingly. But when the speaker goes on and on for a long time, interpreters rely on note-taking.
We want to authorize the use of the dolphin-friendly label by your country's tuna processors.
These symbols represent the speaker's ideas,
The use of authorized equipment and fishing practices.
but each interpreter has their own style. Watch as 3 different interpreters take notes on the same sentence.
We want to authorize the use of the dolphin-friendly label by your country's tuna processors, but we must have a reliable way to verify the use of authorized equipment and fishing practices.
Interpreters usually come up with the symbols beforehand, and as you can see here on Caddy's cheat sheet, she carefully thought about what will be most useful for this particular meeting. The DFL stands for Dolphin Friendly Label. The TU in a box refers to tuna that's being caught. You get the idea. Now let's watch as Caddy interprets her own notes into Spanish.
Queremos autorizar el uso de la etiqueta de dolphin friendly para los procesadores de pescado de su país, pero necesitamos poder verificar que estén utilizando equipos y técnicas de pesca adecuadas.
Now let's switch to simultaneous interpretation. Simultaneous interpretation is usually used with earpieces and microphones and with interpreters working from a soundproof booth. But we won't have equipment in this demonstration. When we're right next to another person, like in this scenario, we can employ what we call chuchotage, which means whispering in French.
Considerar otro tipo de medidas para que
This usually isn't ideal. Whispering for a long time is bad for the vocal cords. It can also be hard to hear due to ambient noise in the room, like ventilation. Now let's talk about pacing. In simultaneous interpretation, you try to maintain an optimal distance from the original speaker. This is referred to as décalage, or ear-voice span. We'll call it EVS. So when one diplomat starts speaking, the person employing chuchotage would probably start here.
We understand perfectly the preferences of the consumers in your country, and that is why we are coming together to identify.
Even if the speaker is speaking at 100 to 110 words per minute, which research tells us is the optimal speed for interpreting, the interpreter still has to figure out the optimal EVS. Here's the problem. The further back in the diplomat's speech the interpreter is,
de los consumidores de su país, y por eso también queremos reunirnos con ustedes para encontrar una solución que sea aceptable.
the more the interpreter has to keep in their short-term memory. They're listening and processing as they're interpreting. It's a lot.
Is high quality dolphin.
But get too close to the original speaker's words, and they may screw up things like grammar, syntax, and style.
Las
The
preferencias
preferences of we understand that the preferences of the country of yours, that is.
And of course, interpreters are prone to fatigue and burnout. Fatigue will hit at around 30 minutes of straight interpreting. This is why simultaneous interpreters often switch out in intervals of 30 minutes or less. If pushed to our limits, interpreters can really suffer. You may recall the 2009 incident in which Muammar Gaddafi's interpreter collapsed at the UN after simultaneously interpreting for over 75 minutes. So what happens if the conversation turns emotional or the speaker becomes rude?
Well, my friend, I've listened to what you have to say, and the only conclusion I can come up with is that you're a damn fool.
Interpreters are not meant to be mediators. Our only job is to stay true to the message of the speaker. If someone becomes rude or angry, if threats are made, then we are supposed to interpret those threats faithfully. So in this situation, an interpreter would not say,
Y la única conclusión a la cual puedo llegar es que usted ha sido un poquitito imprudente.
and here is an example of a faithful interpretation.
Y la única conclusión a la cual puedo llegar es que usted es un perfecto idiota.
Although a speaker may become emotional and gesticulate, the interpreter is not going to parrot the behavior of the speaker. This is not the way.
Pero ¿cómo me puedes hacer esto a mí? Yo pensé que éramos amigos.
How could you do this to me? I thought we were friends.
This is more realistic.
Pero ¿cómo me puedes hacer esto a mí? Yo pensé que éramos amigos.
But how could you do this to me? I thought we were friends.
So the situation has gotten quite intense. Maybe a joke would be helpful to lighten the mood. But jokes are some of the most difficult things to interpret because they can get lost in translation easily.
What did one dolphin say to the other after splashing him? You did that on purpose.
Never mind that this joke barely makes sense in English. In Spanish, it completely doesn't work because porpoise is marsopa and purpose is propósito.
¿Qué le dijo un delfín al otro después de salpicarlo? Usted eso lo hizo encima de la marsopa.
Untranslatable pun.
No entiendo.
Attempts at humor are often lost, and there's not much an interpreter can do. There's an anecdote about an interpreter who, when faced with an untranslatable joke, simply said,
Oiga, su colega acaba de contar un chiste que resulta totalmente intraducible, así que ríase, por favor.
Eso estuvo bueno. Eso estuvo bueno.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Of course, what we've seen today is a tiny excerpt of what are often longer and arduous negotiations. And that concludes our bilateral meeting behind closed doors. This job is tough to juggle the many things that we have to do to be able to interpret well and accurately. But this job is important because it's what makes communication possible between countries and between peoples. I've been at it for 25 years, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Okay, thank you very much for your attention in this video. something very important in here is that they were sharing some concepts and a lot of characteristics. So what characteristics could you see in here? For instance, in my opinion, I see a lot of things. For example, they were talking about bilateral interpreting. So this interpretation is different because even though they are close to the person that they are helping or interpreting, but they are not interacting with the person. So if for example, if you're interpreting a person that maybe it's important, let's say the president or a leader of a company or the CEO, yeah, you can be close to him, but you don't have to be that close. So you can be in a place that maybe you're not interrupting, and also you can be here, okay? So they don't have to be in the middle. That's one characteristic I noticed. The idea is to be in the middle, to be noticed, okay? So you don't have to be noticed. Now, another thing that I noticed is that there are two styles of interpretation. So the first one is simultaneous, okay? So in this one, if you notice, it's like this. Yo comienzo a hablar en español, I start speaking English, and you start to repeat what I'm saying. Tú comienzas a repetir lo que estoy diciendo. This is the one I'm saying, simultaneous. And consecutive is like this. You say something, I hear, and I say what you're saying. Tú dices algo, yo digo lo que tú estás diciendo, pero debo tomar una pausa y tengo que escuchar lo que me está diciendo. That's the main meaning of consecutive interpretation. Now, what happens if the person don't stop, maybe doesn't stop? So they develop let's say that this is an strategy or another way to find like the main way to remember what the person is saying. Because let's say if you keep listening to someone that's speaking, let's say that he's telling a story, está contando un cuento, digamos, comienza a contar y a decir, sí, porque yo me acuerdo el día que yo fui a comer en la pizzería con mi novia y fue un día muy bonito y ese día pude ver, y sigue hablando, and he keeps talking and talking and talking. So they developed this tool that, well, the name is dolphin frame label, okay? So that looks like symbols, okay? So this is something very important because at the end, when you do this, in some way, it helps you to not just remember. It helps you more than remember is or to have an idea of what he was saying. It's more than that because you see graphically what he's saying, and that's how you can learn. Now, as I said, those are symbols. She's not doing nonsense. She's doing something very specific because if you notice, each symbol represents something. Okay, now let's go and talk about simultaneously interpretation. If you notice, one of the characteristics of this simultaneous interpretation is that this is similar to whispering. It's like when you speak like this, and you try to tell the person something. She said something very specific that I noticed that it's true. If you start speaking like that, like this, then your voice gets damaged. It's hurt because at the end you are doing an effort that it's not required, and your voice is not developed or it's not designed to use like that, to be used like that. Okay, so as I said, this is like it's similar to whispering, but it's not the same. And you need to be close to the person. Second, the speaker needs to find the optimal EVS. This is something that we will see later. Then he has to find the best timing. So for example, if you're listening to me, and let's say I'm doing a simultaneous interpretation, and maybe I'm your interpreter and you're listening to me, maybe I start like giving you the translation of what he's saying, but you can pay attention because you can listen to him and you cannot listen to me. So you need to find the perfect timing, as I said, the perfect timing. Now, what happens if the person doesn't stop? It's difficult because at the moment you start doing mistakes, and if you know in the video, she said that there are a lot of mistakes that you commit when you interpret, because at the moment you can make mistakes and it's difficult, believe me. Sometimes you make grammatical mistakes, oral mistakes. So it's normal, and that's what she tried to explain, that this is why they have two interpreters, because at the end they understand that they can be frustrated because they are doing something for hours, so they burn out while they interpreting. Okay, now another thing that I noticed about this part, or about the video, is that at the moment, let's say that the conversation becomes emotional, please don't be a mediator. Please don't do it. You don't have to intervene in anything that they're saying. Just try to say whatever the person is saying, okay? But you need to say it in a correct form. Remember, you need to be professional. So remember, one of the requirements that they ask at the moment that you all have to interpret. You need to listen to the person information, and if he says something that it's not, maybe that is an insult, try to communicate whatever he's saying. For example, she said an insult, that she was so disappointed, and she said that the person was a stupid person, and she communicated the same thing, and they explained how was the proper way to say it. So, as I said again, I'm going to repeat this again, guys. Don't be a mediator. If the person says something, communicate whatever he says. And the last part is that, or the last thing that I noticed in the video, is that sometimes we will have some issue with the jokes. Because if you notice, sometimes Americans, they like to be sarcastic. And sarcasm, it's something that belongs to their language, and it doesn't belong to our languages. For example, if I don't know if you have heard this, but there's something like, there's a phrase that says, "It's raining cats and dogs." If you translate, or if you interpret that information or that phrase into Spanish to English, then there's no sense in what you're saying. Or if you do it in the opposite way, for example, if you say "conchale" or "ajo," or there are a lot of words that we have in Spanish, and that's when things get complicated. When you have to translate to Spanish to English, because we have more expressions than them. Okay? So, in some way, you will have to convey and smile. If you hear a joke and maybe you understand the joke, but the person that you explain what he said or what she said, maybe she doesn't understand, you will have to convey and understand that she's saying something, and remember, this is a communication. So if you're trying to convince or to help someone, let's say this is a deal that they're sealing, believe me, you will have to do something just to make the person feel like, hey, you know something? Hey, it was a good meeting, okay? So just to continue, we were talking about legal conferences and seminars, okay? So as I said, in legal conferences and seminars, interpreters shoulder a significant responsibility, serving as essential conduits for effective communication across language barriers. Their role goes beyond mere language translation and involves several crucial aspects. Okay. Another thing that we have here is that, or some characteristics are, interpreters must ensure the accuracy and precision of language interpretation. Also, interpreters must maintain impartiality and neutrality. You will see it in all the course, that you will have to maintain this impartiality and neutrality throughout the proceedings. Legal conferences often involve contentious issues, and interpreters must refrain from expressing personal opinions, biases, and or emotions. Okay. So try to maintain your impartiality and neutrality, and you need to try to refrain your emotions. Okay. I know it's hard. I know that sometimes we'll hear some information that maybe you hear and you say, hey, this is not fair, or this is not the best way to treat someone. But remember your job. Your job is just to help the person to communicate. And the last one is, interpreters must be adaptive and professional in their approach. They should prepare thoroughly in advance by familiarizing themselves with the subject matter and any relevant documentation. Sorry. So in here, if you notice, something that as interpreter you need to have is that you need to be an adaptive person and be prepared always. Okay? So you should go in advance, and if you think that they will come with something, or they will come with an information that maybe you are not familiarized, please try to search, try to do your own research. Okay. Okay, now listen, I'm going to give you this activity. I'm going to let you do a search the PDF, which is about the reading. I want you to read the entire paragraph on the topic, and then we will comment on the topic. Okay. But before we do that activity, I'm going to give you time to do a recess. Okay. So we're going to take a recess of 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. So let's take a recess of 15 minutes. Okay. Hello. Welcome back. I hope you have take your time. So let's continue with the next part. As I said, this was a recess. Okay, receso. Quedamos con la siguiente parte. So as I said, the activity that we were going to do for now is just to search the PDF, read the entire paragraph on the topic, and then comment on the topic. Okay, so the PDF, mistake. You will see it on the page. If you don't have it, don't worry. You have to see it on the CETES platform. Okay. At this point, I don't have it in here, but you should have it in your platform. Okay. Let me see if I can see it. Okay, so here it is. If you see it, this is document. So the first thing that it says in here is what is the positions. So here we see the concept. So I want you to read it, and we'll have to discuss it. Now, remember, something very important in here is just to read and understand what you're reading, okay? So when you finish reading this, you continue with this topic. Okay? So let's continue with the part that says arbitration and mediation. If you see here, the main job or your main goal in here is just to be the mediation in a conversation. Now, if you read in here, it says, in alternative dispute resolution processes like arbitration and mediation, interpreters help parties communicate and negotiate settlements. They should be knowledgeable about dispute resolution procedures and terminology specific to the relevant field of law. Here's a breakdown of what interpreters do in arbitration and mediation. If you see, there are some some information that we can see. The first breakdown is language breach. As I said in the beginning, you are doing a bridge between the person that you are translating or interpreting. So if you read it here, it says, the primary responsibility of an interpreter is to bridge the language gap. They listen to what each party says in their native language and convey this information accurately and fluently to the other party in their language. Second one is neutrality and impartiality. Interpreters are bound by strict ethical standards to remain neutral and impartial throughout the arbitration or mediation process. Cultural sensitivity. Sorry. Understanding cultural nonsenses and context is vital. It's vital for interpreters. They need to be aware of cultural differences that may impact in communication and be prepared to explain or clarify cultural aspects when it's necessary. So this part is very important, and let me explain you why. Sometimes, let's say, people, they believe that at the moment that you communicate, whatever they say doesn't affect the person that it's listening, but it affects if you start speaking about something that maybe it's not well received. Please try to remember that you need to be sensitive about the situations in other countries. Okay, let's say that a person is having issues with their country and he escaped, but you start talking about the situation that it's living. Believe me, it's not appropriate, and it's not good for the person that it's listening. And the last one is maintaining confidentiality. Arbitration and mediation often involve sensitive information and discussions. Interpreters must maintain strict confidentiality, never disclosing any information learned during the proceedings, okay? So this breakdowns that I already read for you, those are the parts that maybe are important in the arbitration and mediation, okay? Now let's talk about interrogations and police interviews, okay? Now, one of the questions that we can ask ourselves is, what role does the interpreter play in interrogations and police interviews? Now, we need to read the document to respond that answer. But one of the roles that I'm going to give you in advance is that you need to be a mediator again. Because it's not that simple. Because in this case, I know that if you're in a courtroom, it's different. But if you're in an interrogation and the police interviews, this is different. It's more serious. It's like if someone is being accused about something, well, then it's a different situation. Let me read this part for you. In law enforcement settings, interpreters may be involved in interrogations, interviews, and statements made by individuals who do not speak the local language. They must accurately convey statements and responses between law enforcement officers and suspects or witnesses, okay? So in other words, in the last class, I explained you this. You need to try your best just to understand that when you're interpreting someone, the person that you're interpreting, it's like you become the person. You take the place of the person, or you take the voice of the person, and whatever he says, it's going to be the same thing that you will say, okay? So it can be if the person is a suspect or a witness, or also maybe an officer, okay? Now here are 10 of the most commonly translated legal documents and their typical usage, okay? While not a legal proceeding in the traditional sense, legal interpreters may also be tasked with translating legal documents, such contracts, affidavits, and legal briefs. They requires in a deep understanding of legal terminology and the ability to maintain the legal intent and accuracy of the documents, okay? So as I said, I'm going to give you the 10 most commonly translated documents. And also, just to let you know, an affidavit is a written statement made voluntarily by an individual who swears or affirms its accuracy and trustfulness before a notary public, commissioner for oath, or another authorized official. This legal document is commonly used in various legal proceedings, including court cases, to present facts, evidence, or information relevant to the case. Okay, so these are some key characteristics of an affidavit. Include the sworn oath. In the time that you will have, you can read this part if you want. The notarization. The second one is specific format. The legal use. Subject to penalties. I want to read this part, the number 4 for you, okay? If you notice, it says false statements made in affidavit can result in serious legal consequences, including charges of perjury, which is the act of deliberately lying while under oath. So if you try to give a statement and this statement is it's not true, you will receive a serious legal consequences, okay? Including charges of perjury. So it's like, for example, if someone comes to you and says that you robbed his house, you, the person that accused the other person, if whatever you say about that person is not true, well, then the person can be accused you of perjury. This can be seen on contracts, legal briefs, and court documents and immigration documents, okay? Also, wills and testaments, real estate documents, legal certificates, patents, financial and banking documents, medical and healthcare documents, insurance policies. You see, there's a lot of information. Now, you have any question about this? Now, if you notice here, in this part, I'm going to read this part for you, okay? These are some of the most common legal documents that interpreters translate to facilitate cross-border legal processes, protect individuals' rights, and support international business and legal affairs. The accurate translation of these documents is crucial for ensuring that legal matters are conducted fairly, transparently, and in compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Now, I ask you if you have any questions, because if you notice, there's a lot of terminology here that is related to the legal area. Now, for example, if you ask me, one of the questions I would ask is that, is this applicable to all citizens? Or if I am an immigrant, if it is applicable to me? And now let me ask you why, because if you are going to represent someone that maybe he doesn't speak English, you will have to know that. And also, maybe if you're not that person, if you're not the interpreter, and maybe if you're the person that it's having this issue, you need to know this information, okay? So I'm going to give you this glossary. This glossary has 50 phrases commonly used by interpreters in legal conferences, seminars, arbitration, and mediation, okay? So if you notice, the title says legal conference and seminars. This is the same method that I used in the last presentation. So I want you to read the concepts. For example, you have here simultaneous interpretation, consecutive interpretation, trust language, target language. You have a lot of information in here, and you can see all of these concepts and try to, if you don't understand maybe the information that you have in here, maybe the concept, you can Google the concept and you will see the examples. This is about arbitration and mediation, okay? This is also about general interpretation, okay? This will help you also when you have to do general interpretation. So guys, just to conclude this class, let me talk to you about this. Let me explain you this, okay? So it's very important for you to read these phrases and concepts and try to take it for you. I know that maybe sometimes you see those words and you ask, hey teacher, that's too much. But believe me, at the moment that you need to use it, like you need to use all of this information, you will remember, okay? So if you write each information in your notebook or in your notes in your notepad, you will see the results. Okay? So please, I know that in this class, as I said, you need to do the test or the quiz. So I'm going to encourage you to do the quiz in this week. Okay? If you have any question related to this class, you can ask the questions right now, or you can ask the questions through the board, okay, the interactive board. So please remember that if there's any information that you're asking or something that maybe wasn't clear, please ask and we'll help you, okay? So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you can have a good evening and a good time, okay? Así que muchas gracias.
Profe, ¿damos por finalizada la clase o ya? Okay. Damos por finalizada la clase, deseándoles una buena noche a todos y esperemos que vean la grabación en la plataforma. Feliz noche, profe.